Battle of Leyte Gulf. While William Halsey's Third Fleet has been pummeling the Japanese carriers off Cape Engano, the American landing forces in Leyte Gulf have been caught completely off guard. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force, the force Halsey thought was retreating, in fact turned around, sailed all night through the San Bernardino Strait, entered the Philippine Sea, and steamed south toward Leyte Gulf early this morning. With Halsey's Third Fleet well north sinking carriers, Kurita reached the Gulf unopposed and is now bearing down on the American landing forces. Seventh Fleet's battleships are too far south to lend immediate aid, and the destroyers and carriers simply don't have adequate firepower.
They are hopelessly outgunned. There's no weapon larger than a 5-inch gun on any of the American ships in the area. And on the Japanese side, you have battleship Yamato, which is armed with 18.1-inch guns, the largest naval rifles ever installed afloat. They have a second battleship. They have numerous heavy cruisers. This is a mismatch of mythic proportions.
But the commander of one of the small destroyers chooses to stand and make the best showing he can, despite the odds. Lieutenant Commander Ernest E. Evans, commanding the destroyer USS Johnston, determines to charge the enemy.
He had two choices. He could flight or fight. But what he did is he turned his ship and he actually went and he attacked his Japanese armada.
Evans orders his little vessel to speed toward the vastly superior Japanese force. He knows the enemy's guns will be firing on him, but he plans to weave to try to avoid the killing rounds. And if he gets close enough, he might just score a lucky hit. Evans's bold charge inspires other commanders around him, and soon many destroyers join the attack.
They go after the Japanese with both gunfire and torpedoes. They're laying smoke screens to try to screen the escort carriers as they're trying to dawdle their way out at 17 or 18 knots.
Finally in range, Evans unleashes a torpedo at the Japanese heavy cruiser Kumano. The torpedo courses through the sea, and minutes later,
Blew the bow right off the front of a Japanese cruiser.
soon, the Japanese cruiser Suzuya stops to assist the wounded Kumano.
He fired another torpedo, and he also hit and sunk that ship.
Amid the heavy gunfire, torpedo attacks, and the hundreds of planes harassing them, Admiral Kurita and his commanders are bewildered.
The Japanese are thrown into confusion. They believe that they are being attacked by more powerful forces than they are. You start seeing Japanese cruisers getting knocked out. The Japanese battleships are taking damage to their topsides. It makes it very difficult for the Japanese to fight a coherent action against the Americans. They're constantly maneuvering to avoid air attacks, which in turn makes it difficult to direct the gunfire against the American jeep carriers.
Like a bear under attack by a swarm of bees, the Japanese center force falters.
Where they thought that they had a mismatch, and they really did in terms of raw material terms, they're unable to close with the Americans. They're increasingly harassed by American air power. And eventually, the Japanese admiral decides that he's had enough and he leaves.
They said, the hell with this. They turned around and they hightailed it out of there.
The Battle of Leyte Gulf has ended in utter disaster for the Japanese Navy. The Japanese losses at Leyte include 4 aircraft carriers, 3 battleships, 10 cruisers, 11 destroyers, and nearly 14,000 sailors and air crewmen. American losses, by contrast, are relatively light. 1 light aircraft carrier, 2 escort carriers, 2 destroyers, 2 destroyer escorts, and 1,500 sailors and air crewmen.
This really marks the the final demise of the Japanese Navy, and they'll never really be able to do anything of a concerted nature to repel any further attacks by the U.S. Navy at this point. It really is the end of an era.
The U.S. Navy has now eclipsed the force that started a mode of warfare, carrier warfare, whose supreme potential no one had recognized before December 7th, 1941.
No one knew how carriers were supposed to operate. Pearl Harbor really was the initial battle that sort of announced the beginning of the carrier age warfare. Leyte is the battle that announces that there's only one Navy in the world that is really capable of doing that sort of warfare, and it's the U.S. Navy.
The Battle of Leyte Gulf has another preeminent distinction. It is the largest naval confrontation in the history of mankind.